Hey everyone, my name is Kevin, and today we're here to talk to you about some of the new features in Postman version 10. Today I have Carson Hunter and Ian Douglas here to help me out with that. How you guys doing?
Hey everybody.
Hey Kevin. Hey everyone. Good.
So yeah, I mean let's do some introductions. I'm Kevin. I'm Postman's Technical Community Manager, and I live in New York. What about you guys?
Hey Carson.
Awesome.
Oh, we
I'm
got
Carson
a
Hunter.
wild Kin Lane sighting
So
going on
Kin.
here a moment ago. Yeah.
Perks of being in the office. I'm Carson Hunter. I'm based in Atlanta. I'm a technical enablement architect on the solutions engineering team. So I help, build demos and, make sure our customer facing teams have all the Postman resources they need.
Everyone, I'm Ian Douglas. I'm a senior developer advocate here. I'm based in Colorado usually, but I'm out in San Francisco this week. We were at a tech conference about API specifications and hanging out in the office today and flying home tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, and share in the chat where you're from. We'd love to hear that. I have that turned on in the sidebar now, so we should be able to see that. But yeah, like I said, we're here today to talk about some of the new stuff in Postman v10. If you're not aware yet, we have had a huge, probably one of our biggest updates in the last couple years or something like that, come out last Thursday. So there's a ton of stuff to talk about. I'm gonna share my screen. I'll probably hide the chat again just so it's a little easier to read. But we have this page here, Postman v10. I'll share this in the chat. Oh, Ian's got it. Awesome. And there's a ton of stuff to talk about. We're only gonna do a little bit here, because we only have about an hour. But we have a webinar, Postman Space Camp, coming next Wednesday on the 28th, where Arlemy is going to go into even more details about all of this stuff. But we have new partner workspaces, we have features for API governance, API security, native Git support. There's so much to talk about. Before we get into that, there's also some new stuff on the Postman blog. So in the last week, it looks like we've had, I'd say, a lot. I'm not going to count them. There's a lot of new posts. So if you go to blog.postman.com, you can browse through some of this stuff, and a lot of good material to read. For me, I'll be talking about the Postman API builder. There's been a lot of changes in Postman version 10. So today I'm just going to talk about a few of them. I'll get us started by talking about some of these changes in the Postman API builder. The API builder was introduced in version 9 as a way to help teams organize their API development workflows. Since then, we've learned about, hold on.
We'll give Kevin a moment to come back. We're having some issues posting links as well, so we'll get those posted out to Twitch. Carson, if you can log into YouTube and post them over there, that would be helpful. If
Cool,
not, I can
will
try
do.
and grab YouTube as well. So yeah, so we've had quite a few announcements come through on V10. We'll wait for Kevin's setup to come back. Cool. Let's dive in a little bit more on some of the links that Kevin was going to share. So we have the V10 summary. There is a wait list right now. We are going to be rolling out more availability to it in the coming weeks. And so let me post that link here as well. I'll post it on Twitch and I'll post it over on LinkedIn as well. Fortunately, we don't have access to the interface to change what screen you're seeing or anything like that. So we'll do our best to post these links over on the other channels as well. So appreciate others helping us out with those links too. Thank you. So yeah, so today we're going to be going through a number of things. Kevin's going to give us a little more background on what's in V10. We're going to talk a little bit about things like 30 days of Postman. And next week, Arlemy is going to be doing a much bigger unboxing as part of our Space Camp as well. And so we'll be sharing out a link for how to get into Space Camp and how to register for that and hear from Arlemy and all the deeper dive on that. And then from there, I'm going to be showing a little bit of gRPC support in version 10 of Postman, and then talk a little bit about the governance and API security that we're adding in. And then I'm going to hand it off to Carson from there, and Carson's going to walk us through some more bits and pieces about some interesting changes in a new command line tool that we've been building out called Postman CLI. And we'll go through some of those changes as well. Looks like Kevin's back, so welcome back, Kevin.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
No worries.
so I mean, like Ian said, there's a ton to talk about today. I'm going to be going in about the API builder. We've redesigned this to, well, when we initially launched this as version 9, it was meant to be a way for teams to organize their API development workflows better. Since then, we've learned from customers that the feature was pretty complicated to set up and get started with. I've had a lot of good firsthand experience with this, trying to demo this at Postman or the booth at different events. Lots of teams didn't have API schemas to start defining their API, especially when dealing with REST APIs. Now the API builder integrates natively with Git, which means that you can keep and version collections and schemas next to your code base and work on them using your team's pre-existing version control workflows. The UI has been significantly redesigned, which you may not be able to tell from here, but when we create an API, you'll see that. It's been significantly redesigned around the API lifecycle, and their features are now available in a section to the sidebar to allow for a cleaner experience. So let's get started with this. We're going to create an API. So now you can see that this is already prompting you to connect to a repository instead of the old UI before. We're going to name this, let's just leave it as new API, and we're going to connect to GitHub. So glad that worked. So for context, I'm using the API that's mentioned in the 30 Days of Postman challenge. This is day 27, so we should have a link in chat for that. I have to connect here.
Kevin, Carson and I don't have access to post in chat, so we're posting individually on the channels right now.
Oh, okay. I'll try to keep track of that. So you can see you can connect to a GitHub organization with a repository. You can see this repository I've created here. And I just created this beforehand to make things a little easier. And then the initial branch, we have a directory for the API schema. We have the collection directory. I'm going to leave this stuff default and then connect the repository. So now you can see this UI is totally different. We have summary description. You can attach collections. We can look at the definition where now we can see some of these endpoints. So for context, this is the Good Bank API. And we can also look at the Open API schema here. So let's generate a collection based off of this OpenAPI schema. I'm going to name it the Good Bank API. And I'll leave this stuff default for now. And we're done. So now we can see all of those endpoints have been put together for us automatically, including body, whatever tests, that kind of stuff. But in this case, we want to create tests of our own. So under collections, we're going to add a new collection. And I'm going to name this Bank API tests. And I think we're getting background from someone, but let's start with creating.
I'll mute for now.
Okay.
We had some people walk through the office.
That's okay. So we're going to start with, let's create a new user. That seems like a pretty good starting point. I'm going to add a new request and call it create user. Now, we could fill this stuff out manually, but we also have this already generated from the API schema. So let's duplicate it. I'm going to drag this into here. I'm going to get rid of that other one. And now we can see in the body, we have a username, we have a password. It's going to go to this endpoint. Base URL isn't defined, so let's check this and see what's going on there. We have to probably create this variable to that URL. So let's do that real quick. Okay, so that's set. Now we can see that's resolving. Let's just hit send and see what we get. Oh, username is already taken. So in this case, we're going to have to create a new username. Sure, we can, add a 1, run that again. Oh, that's still taken. Let's use one of Postman's features and do a randomly generated first name. So we can start typing. We can look through here. There's a lot of options. We're looking for first name and password. This created Kaylin with a user ID status OK. So we're getting somewhere. Now we want to do some testing. So let's see. We're going to make sure we get a status 200. So we can scroll through the sidebar here and we can see some snippets. These are pre-written bits of JavaScript so that we don't have to do it ourselves. So we can see status code is 200. We'll run this again and test results show that passed. If we change this to something like 403, run it, failing. So working as intended, I guess. Oops, did I just close that? Did. So let's do some other tests then. When we run this, we can see that, let me open that up. We can see, I'm going to quickly fix this. So when we run this, we can see that we created an account. So we want to store that data somewhere because we're going to need that. If we look into here, to log in, you need to pass a username and a password. So let's store the username that it's creating and also that user ID because we'll need that later. So we can look through here and we'll see set a collection variable, and that pre-fills that code for us. So we'll do user ID, and this will be, we have to get something from the response body. So we would do like, let response. Okay, and then response dot, so probably not good. There we go. This will be a little less confusing. Response. So that's the first object in our response. And then from there, username. We'll save this. We'll run that. What am I doing wrong? Response is not defined. Is that not working?
If you go back to your body, is there a property called response? You might not need that dot response since you're already defining it as JSON data.
In the body. So let me comment this out. It was working before. Because it's this response, and we're trying to grab username. I'm gonna copy the code that I've already written because I know this works at least. So that works. What we're doing here is we're checking if the status code is 200. We're storing our response in a constant, and then we're also checking to see if the user was successfully created. So that status is okay. And then we're storing the user ID and the username as a collection variable that we can reference later. So to save on time, we can also go into here. There was that third option to copy an existing collection. I took the time the other day to put this together, and I'll talk us through that for a moment. So let's collapse these, and we're going to look at the good API tests. So this is that same thing we just created. It's creating a random first name, storing that as a variable. Then we have the new user workflow where we're going to try to log in using that stored username, run a couple of tests. So we'll see that status code is okay. It's 200. They've logged in, so we have a session token. We also try to get their user information. So it's using that username again. We're looking if they have user ID is matching. So let's actually step through these while we do this. So we have Iva. We log in as Iva. So we have a session token. Now we'll get the user information. We can see there that's also Iva. We're not getting a random user. We could look at their account summary, which has like their balance and all of that. We run a couple of tests where now we're checking to see if the schema is valid. This can be done using the AJV Postman validator. So the response should have that schema. And then we can also log out. And this is just using the API key, which is that user token that we stored. So we send this, we log out, user successfully logged out. So when we try to view that summary, we shouldn't get any other user summary because we're logged out, which worked. And all those tests are passing. We're expecting a 403, we're expecting forbidden. Now, running this all manually is good and all, but when we want to automate it, you kind of need another solution. You may be thinking, oh, well, we can use the Postman collection runner. I mean, we can, but let's do that real quick. If we go under tests and automation, this is a new section under your API. You can see all of your collections that are attached here. Good bank API tests are the one that we just created. So go through, we'll save our responses, and we'll run this. And we see everything passed. We can see that created a new user. We have Kimberly as a new user. Goes through all this stuff. All of that's good and done. But we could set up to run this with like a monitor or something like that. But DevOps people might be like, well, what about my continuous integration or continuous deployment pipelines? That's what now we have. Let me go back. You can generate a snippet to run your tests on the Postman CLI locally or on your CI tool as well. And there's a lot of other stuff here, but we don't have a ton of time to go through that. So I think Ian and Carson are eager to talk about their stuff. Do you want to take over, Ian, and talk about gRPC?
Sure, sounds good.
Cool.
All right, so in version 10 of Postman, we've basically taken gRPC out of beta. And so I'm going to walk you through some different things going on that we can build in here. So I'm going to start by building out a new gRPC API and walk you through a little bit of how we do testing in gRPC as well. All right, so let me just copy some stuff over here for the sake of time. So in the new V10 workspace, as Kevin mentioned, we're going to have some changes around like some of the interface here. So when we go through to create a new API, we're going to have some options that we can kind of work through. We can give it a name, and we can start by pulling a schema or a spec file over from lots of places like GitHub and Bitbucket and GitLab and things like that. I'm just going to create one right in here, and I'm basically just going to mimic some of the work that came in gRPC bin. From here, what's different in the interface now when we build this out is you've got this new definition area, and I'm going to just make this from scratch, and I'm going to tell it that I'm going to do protobuf, and this is what this is the format that's used for gRPC. I'm not going to worry about the predefined template and just go ahead and create a brand new API where it just puts me into kind of an empty editor where I can start building my own thing. So if you've already got a proto file or if you've already got a specification file, you can just go ahead and add that directly in. If you pull it down or import it from, say, GitLab, GitHub, and so on, we've got some blog posts and videos about how to do those. That will only import it. It won't automatically sync back. You need to go back and synchronize those things later on. But now that we've got this set up in here, in the past, when you create a collection from this, it would create a collection in the API builder, and you would also see a collection showing up here in the context bar. When you click on collections, you would see the collection kind of mirrored between the two. Going forward, the collections are only going to be showing up here in the API section. Now, right now, there's because we're still working on the gRPC implementation in V10, if we were to go in here and click on these three dots and say, I want to add a collection, you can copy something that exists, or you can tell it to create a new one. But right now, if we create a new collection, the collection that gets built here as part of the API builder is actually going to be HTTP based and not gRPC based. And so this is where we have to actually go back to the collections here, or we can use the new button up here and say, I actually want to go make a gRPC request. And then it's going to create that collection for us up here in the up here on the context bar. The team is working on synchronizing these. This is some early feedback that we've had on the interface that the gRPC stuff needs to be tuned just a little bit. And I'll get Kevin and Carson to drop some links kind of as we go through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the new button from here. And I'm going to say I want to make a new gRPC request. Now, all I've done so far is build out my proto file. And so I can't typically say, like, I want to call this right away because I don't have a server. I don't have a mock server or anything like that set up. One thing that you do need to do when you're building out these proto files, because in gRPC now we also allow you to have multiple proto files which can reference each other, but you do need to declare one of them as the root file. Like this is the primary one then that is going to go out and call the others. So I do need to mark this index proto file as my root. But from here now, when I go create that new gRPC request, I can click on the little arrow here and say, and it's saying, well, how do you want to call that request? Do you want to import a new proto file? Do you want to use some server reflection using that URL? Or do you want to use the API that you just built? So in this case, I'm going to choose the one that I just built. And it's showing me my endpoints right away. So I'm going to use the say hello. And then we also have this generator here where it's going to go introspect what you've built out in the proto file as far as what those messages are going to look like back and forth. And we'll actually auto-generate some of the content here just by clicking on this generate example message. It's going to go look at the definition of what it is that you want to build in gRPC, and it's automatically going to do its best to fill something in here. And similar to what we saw Kevin using with the random first name and random attributes that we have, we're using tools like Faker and so on behind the scenes to just come up, in this case, with some Latin for this greeting. So I'm just going to say Postman. And then if I try to invoke this, of course, I don't have a URL, so it's not actually going to send anything anywhere. But one interesting thing that we do with gRPC now, as soon as you build a gRPC API, we actually create a mock server for you right away. And so I don't even have to have a server up and running. I can just go build a proto file. I can give it, kind of the definition of what I want it to do. And now I can send over that invoke, and it sends me what I say is going to be the response, which is just a reply. And normally this, if we were actually hitting the real gRPC bin, we would actually see, hello Postmanauts. So it's taking whatever you're sending as the greeting, and it's just giving you back a message right away. And so now your team can go through and you can start kind of this API first mindset of how do we go in and define and describe and sort of build out the structure of what we want our API to be before we ever build it. And now Postman's going to automatically make those gRPC mock servers for you. Little sneak peek here. I believe the team is targeting Q1 of next year to also automatically spin up these mock servers for HTTP-based APIs as well. So if you're building a RESTful API
nice.
or a GraphQL API, the team is going to automatically spin up those mock servers for you as well. So it's a little ways out, but a lot of what we've been re-architecting sort of on our side as Postman, as part of V10, is setting up our architecture and our infrastructure in a way that we can now start building more of these features out for other areas of the software and other areas that our customers are saying like, hey, it would be really cool if you did this. And so we're going through a lot of the motions right now between changing the interface, making the interface faster, and adding things like these automatic mocks and the server reflections and things like that to better accommodate other API protocols and so on in the future. So let's do this. I'm going to change that URL right now to actually be the gRPC bin. So this is going to be the real gRPC bin that I'm going to hit. And down here, we should see this connect and say, hello, Postmanauts. Come on, gRPC bin. Yay for live demos. All right, let's cancel that and let's try and send it again. So another interesting thing about gRPC APIs versus HTTP-based is you can kind of see, it's a little bit faded out here on my interface, but you can see the status code of 1, meaning that it's canceled. 0 means it successfully went through. 2 means that there might have been an error of some kind. 14 means I couldn't even connect to the server. And so there are actually different status codes as opposed to the HTTP-based, 200 series is okay, 300 is like a redirect. 400 means the user did something wrong. 500 means that something broke on our side. We need to go fix it. And so the status codes of gRPC are also a little different. All right, looks like gRPC bin is not going to respond. So I'm going to go ahead and save this request, and I'm just going to call this say hello. Oh, doesn't like that either. All right. Oh, that's right. I need to create a new collection first. So I told it that I wanted to make a new request, but I have to put it in a collection. So I'm just going to call this testing for now. Going to go create that, and then I'll save that request. Okay, so now up here in collections, in the context bar, now we see that the collection is showing up here. As I mentioned, the team is going to be making that collection appear inside of here as well. If you are building out an HTTP-based API, then you can create your collection in here, both for your documentation team and your testing team. Now, some other areas of the interface have sort of been moved around a little bit. And so when we click on the API itself, you used to see a big tab set over here. We've actually moved them over here on the right side. So getting to your testing, getting to your performance, getting to deployments, these are going to be over here now, publishing and so on. And then you can go in and you can add summaries and descriptions to your API as part of your documentation. You can go through and build out your collections and that sort of thing. And so we've changed quite a bit about the API builder user interface. When it comes to the definition, then you can certainly come in here. You can add new files and add new folders. So if you want to keep your individual spec files a little more organized, then you've got the ability to do that. And then, of course, the files themselves. All right, so from here, another thing that would be a big part of an API-first mindset is the idea of governance, as well as the idea of API security. And so another thing that we've done in Postman v10, let me see if I can go find that tab. Nope, I had it in here. Also
I
not
can
here.
share that in chat.
Yeah. And so we're going to get Kevin and Carson to share some links, but API, sorry, we'll do Postman v10. Yeah, thanks. Is we've added new governance rules inside of Postman. And what we've done here is we've implemented part of the Spectral rules engine. And so Spectral is kind of a definition language for making rules around these sorts of things so that you can do additional linting on pieces of software. And we've basically used a subset of the Spectral rules in order to allow you to actually accommodate your own governance as well. And so what I'm going to show is how to get to that. In the main interface, if we click on the home button, when you're on V10, you'll see two new links here on the home page, one for API governance and another one for API security. And these are both going to use Spectral rules. And I'll talk a little bit about what the differences are here. With the API governance, we effectively have a library of rules that we've kind of defined as Postman to say, these are things that you should think about when you're building out an API. And if I were an admin on this particular team, I would be able to go in and enable or disable some of these. But we have, as part of Spectral, you can go and give it a name and you can give it a definition, and there's links to go learn more about these things. And these will go over to, for us, they go over to short URLs, which will then resolve into some documentation about what these actually mean. And then have customizable severities and things like that, as well as what kind of specification file these are going to be valid for. So we've got a library that you can import as a company to say, these are governance rules that we think that you should take into account. But you'll also have this button here that allows you to create a new rule. Again, I'm not an admin on this team, and so I can't show you what that does. But you'll be able to go in and basically add your own Spectral content for the governance rules that you want your company and your organization to follow as part of that. Also using Spectral, we've also got the idea now of API security as well. So again, the same way that we had the Postman sort of library of what we want you to think about when it comes to governance, we've also taken the OWASP API security rules and guidelines, and we've turned those into a library as well. And so there's lots of things here around like data exposure and so on, and letting you come in and toggle all of these kinds of things, broken user authentication, injection attacks, broken object level authorization. And so your admins can come in here and say, we want to know that when we build out an API, we want to make sure that all these things happen. But you can also, again, you can come in here and you can create your own new rules as well as part of the V10 interface. And so this is going to give teams a lot more confidence, a lot more security around building out their APIs. And from here, I'm going to hand it over to Carson to tell you like a little bit more about how you can actually do some of these things. Because the neat thing is that we're taking these steps of how you lint your API and not just running it within the Postman interface inside of here. Because as I build out the API in here, we can have this actually scan and say, does this follow the governance and API security rules that my team wants me to have or my organization wants me to have. But we're actually going to take it a step farther into the CI/CD pipeline. And so that'll be a good segue over to Carson to share what you got going on.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I'm going to take kind of a little what Kevin talked about, a little what Ian talked about, and kind of go over how the Postman CLI kind of integrates all of it. So we're going to start with running a collection. So Kevin kind of showed this. You've got in V9, you wouldn't see these options for run manually, run via the CLI. You'd kind of just run it manually using the collection runner. That's all, well and good. But a lot of people are using Newman, whether it's to test things locally or to test it in your CI/CD pipeline. And this is like truly one of my favorite features of V10 is because you can already see we've got some code generated for you. So just to back up a little bit, the Postman CLI is a completely new offering from Postman. It lives alongside Newman, so Newman isn't going anywhere, but it is another tool that can help you run your collections in the command line. So we'll take a look at the docs and how they kind of compare a little deeper in a second, but I wanted to show you just, from this screen, how they're a little bit different. So you'll see we've got this Postman login with API key. This is different. So previously, if you were running Newman and you were using kind of the Postman API to get your real-time resources, so instead of downloading your collection in your environment file to run Newman against that static copy, you could use Postman API/collections, and here's my API key, since you're kind of having to log into your account to pull that from your workspace. Now you log in once with the Postman CLI, and you kind of stay logged in and do all of your runs, and you'll stay logged in for that entire session. And from here, you can go ahead and add your API key. I'm not going to do it, but this saves you so many clicks, because before you'd have to go into your account, go to your account settings, click API keys, generate a new one, copy it over, and now you can do that right from here. So that's like already a huge time savings. And then you got this Postman collection run, and this looks a little different than what you were seeing before. So this string of numbers right here is your collection ID, and then your environment is your environment ID. And we'll get into IDs in a second as well. But what I think is so fun is that if you take off the environment, it takes off the environment from the command. You add a new environment, it automatically appends it. Like, I can't tell you how many times Ian and Kevin, I don't know if you've done this as well. You're configuring Newman, you're so excited, and you forget your environment file, and so you have to go
all the time.
Yeah, it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, so this is cool. It kind of like takes the brain work out of it. And one other thing is that, maybe you don't want to run every single request. You can start, unchecking these boxes, moving them around, and this script will automatically update using this kind of I flag to tell the Postman CLI what requests or folders you want to run and in what order, which I think is like mind-blowing, because you could have kind of this set of maybe 10 requests, and maybe you need to run them in a bunch of different orders. Like you've got a bunch of different user flows, like user goes to the shopping basket, they add a product, they check out. Maybe you need to do a bunch of different combinations of those. Previously, you'd have to run you'd have a folder for this scenario and this scenario and this scenario. And now you can kind of maintain that core set of 10 requests, maintain one copy of each of them, and just generate these different configurations. So you're not, maintaining 10 copies of your, shopping cart request, which I think is really cool. So you could go ahead and copy this, start running with the CI/CD pipeline. So there's a link to download the Postman CLI. I think we've got a link to that in the chat. And then you may notice this other info button is you can check all of your runs in the Runs tab. So where was I? So if we go to the runs, let's see. I might have to run this first. Run it manually. If we go to view all runs, I don't know why it's not going there right now, but there is a way to kind of see all of your runs in one place. So previously you might, have used a Newman order. Am I missing it?
If you go back a screen, yeah, it was right there.
Run.
Yeah, go ahead and run it manually.
So you can view all runs.
Yeah, and then there's a runs tab along the top there on the right side.
Am I missing it here?
It says authorization, pre-request, tests, variables, runs. The authorization one is highlighted right now. Yeah, there you go.
Cool. I was missing that for some reason. But you can see kind of all the times you've run this, and once you start running it in the Postman CLI or with Newman, you'll see that show up here as well, which is really cool because you can kind of share these runs with your coworkers instead of having to say, trust me, this request failed and I ran it locally. You can kind of share the link. Everyone can see kind of the status of the API, which is really cool. And one more thing I wanted to show, we were talking about how the CLI uses kind of the requests ID. And so You might not ever need to kind of get this since it's already generated for you, but I think it is good to kind of know how this works. So on any Postman element, you can click on this right-hand context bar, go to the info, and you'll see an ID. This is useful if you're using the Postman CLI or the Postman API to kind of manipulate any elements in Postman. So good to know that that's there. So I wanted to also show just a quick comparison of how Newman and Postman CLI commands look side by side. I know this helped me. So with Newman, you're used to the syntax of Newman run, and then you could pass in your file. With Postman, you can also pass in kind of a static file that you've downloaded. But what that looks like is it's Postman collection run. So slightly different syntax. And I was talking about using Newman run with the Postman API. This is kind of what that would look like. This Newman run, your API request, you pass in your collection ID, your API key. And what that looks like with the Postman CLI is you just pass in that collection ID that we talked about, which is a little easier to understand, a little easier to configure. So you might be kind of wanting some more information before you decide to completely, transfer all of your work over to the Postman CLI. There's probably some questions about, how it's different. So the docs on the Postman CLI have been released. They're really good. And there's this section called Comparing the Postman CLI and Newman. I'll make this a little bigger. And it's a good table to kind of show side by side what's different. One of the big differences is that Newman is, it's created by Postman, but it's open source. The community contributes to it. For the Postman CLI, this is completely closed sourced and signed and supported by Postman. So if that's something that maybe your organization is looking for, it's another option as well. And one of the big features is that it will send your run results back to the Postman UI. So again, you can share those results with your entire team and you're not having to kind of communicate through other channels. So I'll go back to kind of what Kevin was showing earlier. He had his GitHub repo set up. He was showing the test here. Let's see, I need to re-authenticate. Cool. If we go back to here. So what that looks like when you're sending your run results back to Postman is, these are the collection runs we've done inside the app. You can see I've got, some passes, some failures. You could view the report, which looks like what we were looking at before. But I also have kind of my CI/CD set up in my GitLab pipeline. So every time I commit, it will go ahead and send those results back from the pipeline run. Kevin showed this a bit before, how you can pick, your CI/CD provider. You could do Jenkins or GitHub or whatever you're using, and it will go ahead and generate the CI/CD configuration in the language that that platform requires, which again is a huge time savings because especially if you're going back and forth between a couple of providers, that syntax is a little different. So it's really nice that they've already got that all laid out for you. A quick walkthrough of what's here is, so you're downloading kind of the Postman CLI, you're logging in with your Postman API key. You will have to kind of configure that in your provider. But again, there's this generate API key down here, which saves you a lot of clicks. I'm a huge fan of that. And so then you've got this Postman collection run. You're using the file that's in your directory on your CI/CD. But so this file's already generated for you. Maybe you already have kind of a CI/CD file already working in your pipeline. You just want to add the Postman CLI. The main thing to know here is this integration ID. This is the part that's going to actually send your run results so you can see them in the Postman app. So if you are kind of configuring your own, that's a good thing to note. And then you'll see down here, there's also now an option to lint your API. And this is what Ian was talking about with the spectral rules. So it'll take your specification file that you've already committed to the repository, use this integration ID, and it will lint your API. So I don't think we showed this already. So we've got our remote start tests. You can kind of see which tests we're passing. But then if you go down, you can see this icon here matches your definition, which lets you know it's working on your definition file. We can see I've got 18 rule validations, which goes back to the spectral rules. We can see all of the ways my spec is not up to our company standards here, which it kind of lists these out in plain English. If we go to our definition file here, it also shows it in the UI. So it shows you, where this is occurring in your file. So you don't have to like learn the language of spectral. You can kind of just, get this integration going, figure out what the warnings are telling you, fix it, and now you've got kind of a style guide for your APIs. So that's automatically generated in your generated CI/CD text. If you want to look at kind of what this looks like in the command line, I've got this set up. The command is Postman API lint, and then you would pass in your API ID. You'd find that in a similar place to where we showed the collection ID. We'll just run this. And so it's kind of a large output. We start at the top. You can see our API details. It divides up your results into security. It gives you kind of a severity, the role, the description. You can see I've got one error where I need a security field. I've got several warnings, which are more kind of suggestions. And then you go down to governance, which is more of your like style guide, how your company would like things configured so that all of your APIs are kind of in sync. And we've got that path, where to find it, your severity, rule, and description. So that's really nice to kind of have that programmatic checking. Maybe you're getting your APIs, people are editing them in different places, and you can go ahead and use Postman to check them. I think that's a really cool feature. I think that's kind of my overview of the Postman CLI. So I'll stop sharing.
I love that we're putting so much content in that console, where we're drawing all that stuff out. It'd be interesting to see if we can start doing like custom reporting on that as well, if there's a way that we can do it instead of the big ASCII sort of grid that Carson was just showing. But I love that the team has put so much effort into like how to make that experience better for teams and how to do that stuff better for teams and be able to report on that and just see really clearly, and then take all those reports and put them back into the Postman interface. I think that it's really helpful, where Newman, like it'll show you on the command line, but then you got to kind of like go through a bunch of things to figure out like, did it even run? And it's really just a pass fail, where now we're pushing that whole report back to Postman. So anybody else that's not as familiar, not as comfortable with the command line can now go into the interface and actually see like what happened during that run and go into more detail on that. So kudos to the team for building out such a rich interface there. So definitely check out that post that Carson shared about the difference between Newman and the Postman CLI. We're not getting rid of Newman. Newman's still going to be around, and Newman's definitely going to be taking community contributions and that sort of thing. But Postman CLI is going to be closed source, but it's going to have a lot of additional functionality as well, especially for the CI/CD stuff. I think that it's really fantastic that we're doing all that.
Yeah, it looked like there were a lot of time savers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It makes me think of like Danny Dayton's HTML extra reporter. So that's like so popular. Every week he's posting like there's millions and millions of downloads. That's obviously something people wanted, was to have kind of that easily consumable Newman run thing that they could share with their, coworkers. Now that's in the app, like, I don't know. It seems like the team has really listened to developers. It's like how people are using Newman. It's really exciting. And maybe Danny can make like the new HTML, API linting report next to go with the Postman CLI or something.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Someone was asking asking in chat whether Postman v10 is available. So there is a wait list for it. So maybe we can repost that link, Kevin, in chat, and I'll cross post it over to LinkedIn as well. So there it is available. Kevin, do you want to discuss again the availability and how to get into v10?
Yeah, hold on, I'm trying to find that link.
Okay.
Let me toggle my screen back on. I have to juggle a couple of things around. Just one moment. Which tab? This one. Okay, and then see my screen. Yeah, so right now V10 is in kind of like a soft launch, early kind of access phase. And we're rolling these features out slowly to more and more people just to make sure things don't break for everybody. But at the moment you can go to this webpage. I'll share this in the chats. To make sure it actually goes to LinkedIn, because sometimes LinkedIn doesn't post. And you can sign up for early access here. I'm not quite sure what the turnaround time is for this, but once you get in, you'll be able to play with some of these features that we talked about firsthand. But I think that's about it for, I guess, like the early access. Did we want to do shoutouts?
Yeah, we can do shoutouts, and if people still have questions, we'll be on for a few more minutes to do that. Carson, any shoutouts you want to do?
Yeah, I'm gonna shout out the Postman student community live stream. So might be aware of the Postman student community. They have like a huge Discord and Twitter community, and they've started doing live streams. So they'll be, on this channel, I think every Tuesday or every other Tuesday at 4 p.m. And it's really good if you're a student or if you're like an early career professional. They're kind of covering how to get started with Postman, how to get started with APIs, looking at careers in tech. I'm going to be on next Tuesday talking about hackathon tips and tricks. So just wanted to recommend that. If you are a student or know a student, just come back here on Tuesdays and check it out.
I'm going to drop a link to a blog post I just had go live earlier today. It's going to be around choosing between HTTP-based APIs and gRPC. So that just got published today. I'm going to drop that. So I dropped it in LinkedIn, and I will drop it, Kevin, in our private chat here if you want to repost that for everybody. So yeah, that one just went out. I did a bunch of research on looking at the performance implications of HTTP-based APIs and gRPC-based APIs, and sort of the differences between them and some of the comparisons that go in there, and why you may want to choose gRPC over HTTP and vice versa. I think having a really good understanding of the advantages and the disadvantages of anything, whether it's a programming language or a whole, like, how do we build an API? As you learn more, you can make a better comparison and make a better decision over which one to use, as opposed to just, our team only knows RESTful APIs, so we're going to build the next one also as a RESTful API. There may be a technical advantage as to why you want to change and maybe use a GraphQL or an async API or something like gRPC. And so I did a whole bunch of research and put this blog post together. Just went live today.
We had a good question in chat from Mark on YouTube. Do Postman CLI calls count against your Postman API usage?
That is a good question that I'm not sure of. Do either of you know?
I would guess yes, to some degree, because you are, like, when you use the Postman CLI login, you are using your API key. And so I imagine that there are going to be some amounts of Postman CLI usage in there, or Postman API usage in there. But that's a great question. I think, Mark, if you want to follow up with us, maybe offline, I'll see if I can get you a better answer on that.
Yeah, shoot us a message on Twitter, and we'll try to follow up with you. And that goes for anyone else. If you have other questions, you can reach out to us on the community forums or via Twitter, and someone will help you out. But yeah, do you have any other shout outs, Ian or Carson? And then I'll do my thing.
Oh, just shout out to both of you for having some good info to share and doing a live stream today.
Yeah, so this is just like a taste of what's here in V10. Like I said earlier, there's a Postman Space Camp on September 28th, so next Wednesday, where Arlemy is going to go into a bit more detail on some of this stuff. Definitely don't miss that. It's free. There's no point, And actually, let me share a link to that.
No point missing it.
Nope. There's a lot of point in the space camp. Don't miss it though. That's what I meant to say. Unboxing what's new Postman. I should share my screen too. That'd be swell. Yeah. So 28th, you can register now. It's super easy. This link will be in the chat. Otherwise, I have to give a shout out to the Supernovas. I'm the community manager. I manage that program. if you like to create content around Postman or speak at events, I don't like speaking at events, but that's the place for you. I have a link, this one as well, so you can go to this page, read about it, and apply. We've got about like 30 people worldwide, so definitely a place for you. Also, like we mentioned, there's a lot of events going on. So if you go to the Learning Center, you can see, for example, this space camp that's coming up. There's events all around the world. Some of them are virtual. So this is a good place to keep track of all of that. But that's it for me. I guess that's it. Yeah, sign up for the V10 beta
Yeah,
or
we'll see
early
all.
access.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see y'all next week at Space Camp. Looking forward to seeing Arlemy do a deeper dive on a lot of these features. I know we kind of like gave you a bit of a taste, but Arlemy loves to go down the rabbit hole on these things. So definitely come back, ask him lots of questions. In October, the Space Camp, I believe, is going to be revisiting the intro to testing in Postman using V10. And so some of the differences that we're going to have in the V10 interface by that point. And just focusing more on the V side or the V10 side of things as we go as well. So that'll be, I believe, October's Space Camp. I don't know if we have a date set for that yet, though.
One last question, I guess. What's the difference between Newman and Postman CLI? Open source is one, but
yeah. Carson, you want to go back over just some of the highlights on that one?
Yeah, so a couple highlights, high level. You're right on open source. So Newman's open source. The CLI is not open source. It's signed and secured by Postman, whereas Newman is kind of maintained by the community and maintained by Postman. And the big feature of the Postman CLI is sending your run results back to the app so that you can, see those in your workspace, share a link with your team, kind of have one place to collaborate around your test results.
cool. That was great. Thank you. But yeah, I guess it's about that time we wrap up. So if there's any other questions, again, you can let us know on Twitter or the community forums. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for helping out, Ian and Carson.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for hosting, Kevin.
Thanks for all the great questions, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.